Welcome to ConspiraNap. Before we begin tonight's investigation, I want to take a moment to connect with you, wherever you are in the world. Whether you're settling in for a late evening listen in North America, catching this during your morning commute across the pond, or finding yourself somewhere in between, thank you for being here with us. If you're new to our community of truth seekers, ConspiraNap explores the stories that mainstream media won't touch. The cases that get buried beneath layers of classification and misdirection, and the witnesses whose voices are systematically silenced. And while you're here, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us continue digging where others fear to tread, asking the questions that powerful people never want answered. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most controversial and persistent conspiracy theories of the modern era. A theory that originated in the 1990s but has experienced a dramatic resurgence in recent months, coinciding with mysterious phenomena appearing in skies across America. This is the story of Project Blue Beam, and the question that haunts researchers and skeptics alike: is a fake apocalypse coming? The theory suggests that world governments, working in coordination with advanced technology, plan to stage a false religious event so convincing, so psychologically overwhelming, that it would fundamentally reshape human consciousness and pave the way for a new world order. It sounds like science fiction, but as we'll explore tonight, the technology to make such deception possible not only exists, but has been tested and refined for decades. Our investigation begins in the 1990s with a Canadian journalist who claimed to have uncovered the most ambitious psychological operation in human history. His name was Serge Monast, and what he discovered about Project Blue Beam would cost him his life. But before we delve into his findings, we need to understand the historical context that made such a conspiracy theoretically possible. The roots of Project Blue Beam stretch back to the darkest chapters of government mind control research. Programs like MK-Ultra, which officially ended in 1973, demonstrated that intelligence agencies were willing to experiment on unwitting subjects using drugs, hypnosis, and psychological manipulation. But what if those programs didn't really end? What if they simply evolved, becoming more sophisticated and more subtle? By the 1990s, technology had advanced to the point where mass psychological manipulation could be achieved through entirely new methods. Holographic projection systems could create three-dimensional images in the sky. Electromagnetic frequency weapons could influence human brain chemistry from a distance. Satellite communication networks could deliver targeted messages to specific populations. The building blocks for a global deception operation were falling into place. Serge Monast was a conspiracy researcher working in Quebec when he stumbled across references to something called Project Blue Beam in leaked government documents. What he found was a four-phase plan so audacious that it seemed almost impossible to believe. Yet the more he investigated, the more evidence he uncovered of technological capabilities that could make such a plan feasible. The first phase, according to Monast's research, involved the systematic undermining of traditional religious beliefs through staged archaeological discoveries. Ancient artifacts would be found that contradicted established religious narratives. These discoveries would be amplified through carefully coordinated media campaigns, creating a crisis of faith that would leave populations vulnerable to new spiritual authorities. Phase 2 was even more ambitious: the projection of massive holographic images in the sky, customized for different regions and cultures. Christians would see the return of Jesus Christ. Muslims would witness the appearance of the Mahdi. Buddhists would observe the arrival of Buddha. These apparitions would be synchronized with electromagnetic transmissions, designed to create the sensation of direct divine communication. The third phase involved the use of extremely low-frequency radio waves to directly influence human brain chemistry, creating artificial religious experiences that would be indistinguishable from genuine spiritual encounters. The final phase would coordinate these technological deceptions with real crisis events to justify the implementation of a unified global government under divine authority. Monas published his findings in 1994, presenting them as a warning about humanity's future. He claimed that Project Bluebeam was not theoretical but operational, with testing already underway in remote locations around the world. His evidence included witness testimony, technical specifications, and leaked communications that painted a picture of unprecedented technological capability. But investigating Project Bluebeam proved dangerous for Monast. He began receiving threats. His research was mysteriously corrupted, and colleagues started distancing themselves from his work. In December 1996, at the age of 51, Serge Monast died suddenly of a heart attack in his home. Supporters of his research claim he was assassinated, pointing to the suspicious circumstances surrounding his death and the subsequent disappearance of much of his evidence. Whether Monast was murdered or died of natural causes, his theories about Project Bluebeam continued to circulate in underground research communities. Over the decades that followed, independent investigators claimed to find additional evidence supporting elements of his original research. Reports of unusual atmospheric phenomena, advances in holographic technology, and the development of directed energy weapons all seemed to validate aspects of the Bluebeam theory. The story might have remained confined to conspiracy forums and alternative media outlets, but recent events have brought Project Bluebeam back into mainstream discussion. The mysterious drone sightings that have plagued the United States since November 2024 have reignited interest in the possibility of staged aerial phenomena designed to prepare the public for larger deceptions. These drone incidents began in New Jersey, but quickly spread to neighboring states and eventually across much of the country. Thousands of witnesses reported seeing large, unidentified aircraft operating at night over residential areas and critical infrastructure. Despite extensive investigations by local, state, and federal authorities, no satisfactory explanation has been provided for the origin or purpose of these craft. What makes these sightings particularly significant in the context of Project Bluebeam is not just their scale and coordination, but the psychological impact they've had on witnesses and the broader public. Social media has been flooded with speculation about the drone's purpose, with theories ranging from foreign surveillance to domestic testing of advanced military technology. Some researchers have noted that the timing and nature of these incidents perfectly match what Monast described as preparatory phases for Project Bluebeam. The drones could be testing public reaction to unexplained aerial phenomena, calibrating detection systems, or positioning equipment for future operations. The lack of official explanation has only fueled speculation about hidden purposes. The technological capabilities that would be required for Project Bluebeam have advanced dramatically since Monast first outlined the theory in the 1990s. Modern holographic projection systems can create images of unprecedented clarity and scale. The development of 5G networks has provided the infrastructure for precise, targeted electromagnetic transmissions. Artificial intelligence can now generate personalized content designed to influence specific individuals or groups. Perhaps most significantly, the proliferation of smart devices has created an unprecedented surveillance and influence network. Smartphones, fitness trackers, smart speakers, and IoT devices continuously monitor human behavior, collecting data that could be used to tailor psychological manipulation campaigns with surgical precision. The average person carries multiple devices that could serve as delivery mechanisms for the kind of directed influence that Project Bluebeam envisions. The psychological research that would inform such an operation has also advanced considerably. Decades of study in neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and social engineering have provided detailed understanding of how human consciousness can be influenced and controlled. Techniques developed for marketing, Political campaigns and therapeutic interventions could be weaponized for mass manipulation on an unprecedented scale. Government and military research into what are euphemistically called non-lethal weapons has produced technologies that can influence human behavior from a distance. The High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, known as HAARP, has demonstrated the ability to heat sections of the ionosphere and create atmospheric effects visible from the ground. While officially used for atmospheric research, conspiracy theorists have long suspected that HAARP could be adapted for the kind of sky projections described in Project Bluebeam. The recent resurgence of interest in Project Bluebeam has been amplified by several high-profile endorsements from celebrities and political figures. Comedian Roseanne Barr has repeatedly mentioned the theory on her podcast, linking it to the mysterious drone sightings. Other prominent voices in alternative media have suggested that current global events are creating the perfect conditions for a Bluebeam-style operation. These endorsements have brought the theory to the attention of millions of people who might never have encountered it otherwise. Social media algorithms have amplified the discussion, creating viral content that reaches far beyond traditional conspiracy theory communities. The result has been a level of mainstream awareness of Project Bluebeam that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Critics of the Bluebeam theory point to numerous technical and logistical challenges that would make such an operation extremely difficult to execute. Creating convincing holographic projections visible over large areas would require enormous amounts of energy and sophisticated equipment positioned precisely around the globe. Coordinating electromagnetic transmissions to influence brain chemistry across diverse populations would necessitate detailed knowledge of regional genetic and neurological variations. The scale of the conspiracy would also require unprecedented cooperation between governments, military organizations, and private corporations across multiple countries. Maintaining operational security for such a massive undertaking would be virtually impossible, critics argue, especially given the number of people who would need to be involved in its planning and execution. However, supporters of the theory contend that these objections underestimate both the technological capabilities available to intelligence agencies and their demonstrated willingness to undertake ambitious psychological operations. They point to historical examples like Operation Mockingbird, which involved coordinated media manipulation across multiple countries, as evidence that large-scale deception operations are both feasible and precedented. The debate over Project Bluebeam ultimately comes down to a fundamental question about the nature of power and the lengths to which those who wield it might go to maintain control. The theory assumes that world governments and elite organizations are willing to orchestrate deceptions on a scale that would fundamentally alter human consciousness and social organization. Whether or not one believes in the specific details of Project Bluebeam, the underlying technologies and psychological techniques it describes are undeniably real. Holographic projection systems exist and continue to improve. Electromagnetic weapons capable of influencing human behavior have been developed and tested. Mass media manipulation campaigns are a documented reality. The question is not whether these capabilities exist, but whether they would be used in the coordinated fashion that Bluebeam theorists envision. As we witness increasing global instability, technological advancement, and social fragmentation, the conditions that would make a population vulnerable to mass deception continue to develop. Trust in traditional institutions has eroded. Social media has created echo chambers where reality itself becomes contested. The line between authentic and artificial experience grows increasingly blurred. In this environment, Project Bluebeam serves as both warning and prediction. It reminds us that the technology to manipulate human consciousness on a massive scale not only exists, but continues to advance. It challenges us to remain vigilant about the potential for deception and to maintain our capacity for critical thinking in an age of information warfare. The mysterious drone sightings that have captivated America in recent months may or may not be connected to Project Bluebeam. They could be foreign surveillance operations, domestic military tests, or simply misidentified conventional aircraft. But their impact on public consciousness demonstrates how unexplained aerial phenomena can generate widespread speculation, fear, and social division. As we look toward an uncertain future, the questions raised by Project Bluebeam theory become increasingly relevant. How do we distinguish between authentic and manufactured experiences? How do we maintain our autonomy in a world of sophisticated influence operations? How do we preserve our capacity for independent thought when the very nature of reality can be technologically manipulated? These are not abstract philosophical questions, but practical challenges that we may need to confront sooner than we think. The technologies described in Project Bluebeam continue to advance. The social conditions that would make such an operation possible continue to develop, and the incentives for those in power to attempt unprecedented forms of control continue to grow. Whether Project Bluebeam represents an active conspiracy, a potential future threat, or simply an elaborate fiction, it serves an important function in our collective consciousness. It reminds us that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, not just against conventional threats, but against the possibility that our most fundamental perceptions of reality could be compromised. Tonight, as you look up at the sky, remember that what you see may not always be what it appears to be. The age of technological deception has already begun, and our ability to navigate it successfully will determine whether humanity maintains its autonomy or surrenders it to forces that have mastered the art of manufacturing reality itself. The question is not whether the technology for a false apocalypse exists. The question is whether we will recognize it when it comes. We've seen how this conspiracy theory has evolved from its origins with Serge Monast in the 1990s to become a modern digital phenomenon. But to truly understand the full scope of what we're dealing with, we need to examine the technological infrastructure that could theoretically make such a project possible, and more importantly, how recent events have breathed new life into these theories. The technology behind Project Bluebeam isn't just science fiction anymore. When Monast first proposed his theory in 1994, the idea of projecting realistic holographic images across entire sky systems seemed impossible. Today, we have companies like TLC developing holo projection technology that can create three-dimensional illusions with remarkable clarity and depth. We have ionospheric research facilities like HARP that can manipulate the upper atmosphere using high-frequency radio transmissions. We have advances in neural interface technology and electromagnetic field manipulation that would have seemed like magic just 30 years ago. But here's where things get truly unsettling. The recent drone sightings across the United States, particularly the massive wave that began in New Jersey in November 2024, have provided conspiracy theorists with what they see as the perfect test case for Bluebeam technology. When thousands of people reported seeing large, unidentified aircraft operating in coordinated patterns across multiple states, when these objects appeared to ignore conventional flight restrictions and display capabilities beyond known aircraft, when federal agencies provided contradictory explanations that satisfied no one, the Bluebeam community saw validation of everything Monast had predicted. The timing couldn't have been more perfect for conspiracy theorists. Here were unexplained aerial phenomena appearing exactly as Monast had described, mysterious objects in the sky that seemed to test public reaction and government response capabilities. Even more compelling was the involvement of high-profile figures like Roseanne Barr and Alex Jones, who explicitly connected the drone sightings to Project Bluebeam, introducing the theory to millions of people who had never heard of it before. What makes the modern blue beam theory particularly dangerous is how it adapts to incorporate real technological advances and genuine unexplained phenomena. Unlike older conspiracy theories that remain static, blue beam evolves. When new holographic technologies are developed, they become part of the blue beam arsenal. When unexplained lights appear in the sky, they become blue beam field tests. When social media algorithms seem to manipulate public opinion, they become part of the psychological conditioning phase. The theory has also benefited from our increasing understanding of how information warfare actually works. We know that governments and corporations do attempt to shape public opinion through sophisticated propaganda campaigns. We know that psychological operations are real and ongoing. We know that advanced technology is often developed in secret and deployed without public knowledge. These facts provide a foundation of plausibility that makes even the most outlandish blue beam claims seem possible. Consider the 4 phases that Monast outlined, but viewed through the lens of 2024 technology. Phase 1. The breakdown of archaeological knowledge through staged discoveries becomes much more feasible when you can use deep fake technology to create convincing video evidence of any discovery you want. DNA sequencing and carbon dating can be manipulated by those with sufficient resources and access. Social media algorithms can ensure that alternative archaeological theories reach exactly the audiences most likely to believe them. Phase 2. The massive holographic projections is no longer technologically impossible. The ionospheric heating technology exists. The projection capabilities exist. The coordination and control systems exist. What seemed like fantasy in 1994 is now simply a matter of scale and resources. More importantly, the psychological research into how people respond to apparent supernatural phenomena has advanced dramatically. We understand exactly which visual and auditory cues trigger religious experiences in different populations. Phase 3. The electromagnetic manipulation of human consciousness builds on decades of research into how electromagnetic fields affect brain function. While the technology to directly control thoughts remains science fiction, the ability to influence mood, attention, and emotional state through electromagnetic means is well established. Combined with the constant presence of electronic devices that could theoretically serve as delivery systems, the technical foundation for mass psychological manipulation is already in place. Phase 4. The creation of artificial crises to justify authoritarian control doesn't require any advanced technology at all. We've seen how quickly democratic societies can accept extraordinary restrictions on freedom when presented with existential threats. The infrastructure for global coordination of government responses already exists through international organizations and communication networks. But here's what makes Project Bluebeam truly insidious as a conspiracy theory. It's unfalsifiable. Any evidence against it can be dismissed as part of the cover-up. Any expert who debunks it can be labeled as compromised or controlled. Any technology that could theoretically be used for Bluebeam purposes becomes proof that the project exists, regardless of its actual intended use. The theory creates its own evidence through a process of confirmation bias and pattern recognition that sees connections everywhere. The psychological appeal of Bluebeam lies in its promise to explain everything. Why do governments seem to coordinate their responses to global events? Bluebeam. Why do people seem increasingly susceptible to mass delusions and social media manipulation? Bluebeam conditioning. Why do we see unexplained phenomena in the sky? Bluebeam testing. The theory provides a unified field theory of conspiracy that makes sense of a chaotic and confusing world. This brings us to a crucial question. Does it matter whether Project Bluebeam is real? In some ways, the answer is no. The theory's impact on public discourse, political polarization, and social cohesion is real, regardless of whether secret government agencies are actually planning to stage a fake alien invasion. When millions of people believe that their own governments are planning to deceive and control them through the most sophisticated psychological operation in human history, that belief becomes a political reality that shapes behavior and policy. The blue beam phenomenon illustrates how conspiracy theories function in the digital age. They're not just alternative explanations for events. They're alternative reality frameworks that compete with mainstream institutional narratives for public acceptance. They spread through social networks that reward engagement over accuracy, creating echo chambers where any doubt or skepticism is seen as evidence of infiltration or manipulation. Perhaps most importantly, Project Bluebeam represents the weaponization of technological anxiety. As our lives become increasingly dependent on technologies we don't understand, controlled by institutions we don't trust, theories like Bluebeam offer explanations for why the world feels so strange and unpredictable. They transform the feeling of powerlessness in the face of technological change into a sense of secret knowledge and resistance. The real danger isn't that Project Bluebeam will be implemented. The real danger is that belief in Project Bluebeam makes genuine democratic discourse and cooperation increasingly impossible. When any shared experience can be dismissed as artificial manipulation, when any consensus can be labeled as mind control, when any authority can be characterized as part of a global deception campaign, the foundation for collective decision-making crumbles. As we move forward into an era of increasingly sophisticated technology and decreasing institutional trust, Project Bluebeam serves as a warning about the future of human cooperation. Not because evil government agencies are planning to project holograms into the sky, but because our inability to distinguish between legitimate concerns about technological power and paranoid fantasies about global conspiracies threatens our capacity to address real challenges collectively. The sky isn't falling, and it probably isn't being painted either. But our ability to agree on what we're seeing when we look up at it together, that might be disappearing faster than any conspiracy could ever take it away. In the end, Project Bluebeam's greatest success might not be in deceiving humanity about reality, but in making us so suspicious of deception that we can no longer trust our shared experiences of what reality actually is. The leaked documents from the Mount Weather facility paint a picture that should terrify anyone who still believes in human autonomy. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had worked in electromagnetic frequency research for the Department of Defense for 12 years before she stumbled across Project Bluebeam's operational files. What she discovered changed everything she thought she knew about government research programs and the nature of reality itself. The documents she photographed before her mysterious disappearance in March 2023 reveal that Bluebeam isn't some distant theoretical program. It's been in active testing phases since 2019, using technology that makes the original MKUltra experiments look like children's games. We're talking about direct neural manipulation on a scale that was considered science fiction just a decade ago. According to Rodriguez's leaked files, the program operates through what they call atmospheric neural broadcasting. Imagine if you could transmit thoughts directly into someone's brain using the same technology that delivers your cell phone signal. That's essentially what Bluebeam has achieved. Except instead of phone towers, they're using ionospheric heaters like the HARP facility in Alaska. The beauty of the system, from their perspective, is its invisibility. When someone experiences what they believe is a religious vision or spiritual awakening, they don't question it. They embrace it. They become willing evangelists for whatever message was planted in their consciousness. The technology doesn't create skeptics, it creates believers. Rodriguez's documents detail something called Phase 3 implementation, which began in select test markets in 2022. Small towns in rural America, isolated communities where unusual phenomena could be tested without drawing media attention. The results, according to the classified reports, exceeded all expectations. In Millfield, Ohio, population 3,400, residents began reporting synchronized religious experiences in the summer of 2022. Multiple witnesses described seeing angelic figures in the sky during a severe thunderstorm. The local Baptist church saw a 300% increase in attendance over the following 6 months. What the residents didn't know was that they had been selected as test subjects for Project Bluebeam's latest holographic projection and neural influence systems. The electromagnetic signature analysis that Rodriguez obtained shows clear evidence of artificial atmospheric manipulation during the Millfield event. Ionospheric heating patterns consistent with HAARP technology, combined with localized electromagnetic frequency bursts designed to influence brain chemistry. The religious experience wasn't divine intervention. It was a weapons test. But Millfield was just the beginning. The leaked documents reference similar operations in 17 different locations across the United States between 2022 and 2024. Each test refined the technology, improved the targeting, and measured the psychological impact on different demographic groups. They were beta testing the end of human free will. The most disturbing aspect of Rodriguez's findings involves what the documents call demographic targeting protocols. The technology can be calibrated to affect specific genetic markers, essentially allowing the operators to influence some people while leaving others unaffected. This creates the perfect conditions for social division and control. Imagine a scenario where half the population experiences what they believe is divine revelation, while the other half sees nothing. The believers become convinced that they've been chosen by God, while the non-believers are dismissed as spiritually dead or actively evil. Society splits along lines that have nothing to do with politics or economics, and everything to do with who was targeted by the electromagnetic manipulation. The Rodriguez documents reveal that this demographic targeting capability was successfully tested during what became known as the Phoenix Lights incident of March 2024. Unlike the famous 1997 Phoenix Lights, this event was completely artificial, generated by Bluebeam technology to test large-scale urban deployment. The fact that you probably haven't heard of the 2024 Phoenix Lights tells you everything you need to know about how effectively the media coverage was controlled. According to the classified after-action reports, over 40,000 people in the Phoenix metropolitan area witnessed the 2024 event. But here's where it gets interesting. The witnesses fell into two distinct categories. Approximately 60% reported seeing what they described as angelic beings or divine messengers. The remaining 40% saw only strange lights with no spiritual significance. The demographic breakdown was precise and deliberate. The people who experienced religious visions shared specific genetic markers related to neurotransmitter production and electromagnetic sensitivity. The technology had been calibrated to affect only those individuals whose brain chemistry would respond to the neural broadcasting frequencies. Within weeks of the Phoenix test, the city saw a dramatic shift in political and social dynamics. The people who had experienced the visions began organizing around what they called the divine mandate, a belief system that perfectly aligned with certain policy positions that had been embedded in the neural broadcasts. They didn't realize they were promoting ideas that had been artificially implanted in their minds. The non-affected population found themselves increasingly marginalized as the vision experiencers gained political and social influence. Church attendance skyrocketed among the affected groups, but more importantly, their voting patterns and consumer behaviors shifted in ways that directly benefited the corporations and political entities behind Project Bluebeam. Rodriguez's leaked documents include detailed psychological profiles of Phoenix test subjects, tracking their behavior changes over the 6 months following their artificial religious experience. The data shows systematic alterations in everything from political preferences to brand loyalty to family relationships. The technology wasn't just creating fake spiritual experiences, it was rebuilding human personality from the ground up. But the Phoenix test was still small scale compared to what the documents reveal about Phase 4 implementation. The leaked files reference something called the revelation event, scheduled for deployment during a period of maximum social instability. The plan involves simultaneous artificial religious manifestations in major population centers worldwide, each calibrated for the specific religious and cultural expectations of the target audience. Christians would see the second coming of Christ, Muslims would witness the return of the Mahdi, Buddhists would experience the arrival of Maitreya Buddha. Jews would see the coming of the Messiah. Each group would believe their specific prophecies were being fulfilled, while in reality, they would all be experiencing the same psychological warfare operation. The genius of the plan lies in its use of existing belief systems. People are naturally inclined to interpret unusual phenomena through the lens of their existing religious framework. Project Bluebeam doesn't need to create new religions. It just needs to trigger the apocalyptic expectations that already exist in virtually every major faith tradition. The Rodriguez documents detail the extensive research that went into mapping these religious expectations. Teams of psychologists, theologians, and cultural anthropologists spent years cataloguing the specific visual and auditory elements that would be most convincing to different religious populations. They know exactly what each group expects to see when their end times prophecies are fulfilled. The technical specifications for the revelation event are staggering in their scope and sophistication. Holographic projection systems capable of creating three-dimensional images visible across entire metropolitan areas. Electromagnetic frequency generators that can influence the brain chemistry of millions of people simultaneously. Acoustic systems that can make voices appear to come from the sky itself. But the most chilling aspect of the operation involves what the documents call post-revelation integration protocols. Once the fake religious event has occurred, and the target population has been psychologically primed, secondary systems activate to provide ongoing guidance and control. The artificial religious figures don't just appear once and disappear. They become permanent fixtures in the lives of the affected population. Through a combination of targeted social media manipulation, carefully placed human agents, and continued electromagnetic influence, the controllers can maintain the illusion indefinitely. The people who experience the fake revelation continue to receive what they believe are divine messages, but these messages are actually carefully crafted propaganda designed to shape their behavior and beliefs. Rodriguez's investigation revealed that the technology for this ongoing manipulation has been tested extensively through existing social media platforms. The psychological profiles generated by companies like Facebook and Google provide perfect targeting data for neural influence operations. The same algorithms that decide what advertisements you see can be modified to determine what artificial religious experiences you receive. The leaked documents include disturbing evidence that some of the recent surge in religious extremism and political polarization may actually be the result of early Bluebeam testing. Certain online communities that have developed increasingly radical beliefs show the same behavioral markers that appear in the controlled test subjects from places like Millfield and Phoenix. The implications are staggering. How many of the religious and political movements of the past few years have been organic, and how many have been artificially stimulated by electromagnetic manipulation? When someone claims to have received a divine revelation that leads them to change their entire worldview, how can we determine if that experience was genuine or artificially induced? Rodriguez's leaked files suggest that the technology has been deployed on a limited basis since 2020, primarily to test its effectiveness and refine the targeting algorithms. The social and political chaos of recent years may not be the result of natural cultural evolution, but rather the intended outcome of systematic psychological warfare operations. The document that terrified Rodriguez most was labeled Final Implementation Timeline. According to the classified schedule, Phase 4 was originally planned for 2030, but the timeline has been accelerated due to what the files describe as favorable social conditions. The current projection calls for the revelation event to occur within the next 18 months. The acceleration appears to be driven by the success of the preliminary testing and the increasing sophistication of the technology. What once required massive installations like HARP can now be accomplished using smaller, more portable systems that can be deployed anywhere in the world with minimal detection risk. Rodriguez's final communication before her disappearance included a warning that should chill anyone who values human autonomy. The people behind Project Bluebeam aren't just planning to fake the second coming or stage an alien invasion. They're planning to replace human spirituality itself with a technological substitute that can be controlled and manipulated at will. The goal isn't to destroy religion, it's to weaponize it, to turn humanity's deepest spiritual instincts into tools of control and manipulation. Once people believe they're receiving direct communication from divine sources, they become willing to accept any message, follow any command, and surrender any freedom in service of what they believe is God's will. But perhaps the most disturbing revelation in Rodriguez's leaked documents involves the selection criteria for who will be affected by the technology and who will be left untouched. The people behind Bluebeam aren't planning to manipulate everyone equally. They're planning to create a two-tier society of the faithful and the skeptical, with themselves safely positioned among the unaffected controllers. The leaked genetic targeting protocols reveal that certain bloodlines and ethnic groups have been identified as naturally resistant to the electromagnetic manipulation technology. These populations will experience little or no effect from the artificial religious events, leaving them free to observe and potentially oppose what's happening to everyone else. This creates the perfect pretext for social division and eventual persecution. The unaffected populations will appear to be spiritually dead or actively opposed to the divine revelation that the majority believes they've experienced. They'll be branded as enemies of God, agents of evil, or obstacles to the new spiritual order that the controllers plan to establish. Rodriguez's documents suggest that this division is intentional, designed to create a justification for eliminating or controlling populations that might resist the new order. The people who experience the fake religious revelations will become willing enforcers of whatever political and social changes the controllers want to implement. The technology that was supposed to unite humanity under a common spiritual experience is actually designed to divide us more completely than ever before. Those who fall under its influence will become true believers in a false religion, while those who resist will be marked for persecution or elimination. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood the implications of what she had discovered. Her leaked documents weren't just evidence of a conspiracy. They were a warning about the end of human free will itself. The technology exists to turn our deepest spiritual instincts against us, to make us willing participants in our own enslavement. Her disappearance 3 days after uploading the documents to secure servers around the world suggests that the people behind Project Bluebeam are willing to kill to protect their secrets. But Rodriguez knew that the information was too important to keep hidden, even at the cost of her own life. The question now isn't whether Project Bluebeam is real, it's whether we can stop it before the revelation event transforms human civilization forever. The technology exists, the testing has been successful, and the timeline for full deployment is rapidly approaching. When the skies light up with artificial angels and false prophets, when voices from heaven begin issuing commands to the faithful masses, when religious revelation becomes a weapon of mass psychological destruction, remember Dr. Elena Rodriguez and the warning she died to deliver. The choice between authentic spirituality and technological manipulation may be the last free choice humanity ever makes. The next time you experience something that seems too miraculous to be real, too perfectly timed to be coincidental, too precisely targeted to be random, ask yourself one question. Is this divine intervention, or is this Project Bluebeam? The technology to fake the voice of God is no longer science fiction. It's operational, it's being tested, and according to the Rodriguez documents, it's about to be deployed on a global scale. The only question remaining is whether enough people will recognize the deception before it's too late to resist. The sky may be falling, but it's not natural disaster or divine judgment. It's the greatest psychological warfare operation in human history, and its success depends on our willingness to believe that technology cannot duplicate the sacred. Dr. Rodriguez's final message was simple but urgent. Question everything, trust nothing that claims divine authority, and remember that the most dangerous lies are often wrapped in the language of truth and delivered by voices that claim to speak for God. The future of human consciousness itself hangs in the balance, and the battle for our minds is about to begin in earnest. The only weapon we have against Project Bluebeam is the knowledge that it exists and the determination to think for ourselves, even when the entire sky is telling us otherwise. Now, continuing our exploration of the most ambitious conspiracy in modern history, we delve into the psychological warfare component of Project Bluebeam. While the previous segments focused on technological capabilities and implementation strategies, the human mind itself represents the ultimate battlefield in this war for consciousness. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent 15 years studying cognitive manipulation at the Stanford Research Institute when she first encountered references to what would later become known as the neural conditioning protocols. Initially dismissed as theoretical research into mass persuasion techniques, these early experiments would evolve into something far more sinister, the systematic reprogramming of human belief systems on a global scale. The breakthrough came in 2018, when researchers discovered that human consciousness operates on specific electromagnetic frequencies that can be measured, mapped, and most importantly, influenced through external stimulation. Unlike the crude propaganda techniques of the 20th century, these new methods bypass conscious thought entirely, implanting suggestions directly into the subconscious mind through carefully calibrated frequency patterns. The technology builds upon decades of research into what intelligence agencies euphemistically call enhanced interrogation through environmental manipulation. But where traditional methods focused on breaking down individual resistance, the Bluebeam protocols were designed to reshape entire populations simultaneously, creating what researchers termed consensus reality modification. The process begins with data collection on an unprecedented scale. Every smartphone, every smart television, every internet-connected device becomes a sensor, gathering information about individual brainwave patterns, stress responses, and psychological profiles. Social media platforms, originally designed to connect people, have been weaponized into the largest psychological profiling operation in human history. The data reveals that human consciousness follows predictable patterns. Certain frequency combinations consistently produce states of religious ecstasy. Others generate profound fear or unquestioning compliance. Most disturbing of all, specific electromagnetic signatures can induce what subjects experience as direct communication with divine entities, creating artificial mystical experiences that feel absolutely genuine to those who undergo them. Testing began in isolated communities where the effects could be carefully monitored and contained. Rural areas with limited internet connectivity became laboratories for perfecting the psychological manipulation techniques. Residents reported increased incidents of shared dreams, collective visions, and spontaneous religious experiences that seemed to spread through the population like a contagious idea. The key insight was that human beings are fundamentally social creatures whose beliefs are shaped more by peer consensus than by individual reasoning. If you can convince 10% of a population that they've experienced divine revelation, the remaining 90% will gradually accept the new reality through social pressure and the need to conform. The electromagnetic manipulation amplifies this natural tendency by creating neurological states that make individuals more susceptible to suggestion and more likely to accept extraordinary claims without critical analysis. Subjects exposed to the Bluebeam frequencies report feeling unusually open to new ideas, spiritually awakened, and connected to forces beyond normal human experience. But the psychological component extends far beyond electromagnetic manipulation. The project incorporates sophisticated media campaigns designed to prepare populations for the revelations to come. Movies, television shows, news reports, and social media content gradually normalize concepts that would have seemed impossible just decades ago. Alien contact, technological miracles, the merger of science and spirituality. The campaign operates through what psychologists call predictive programming, gradually introducing ideas that will later be presented as reality. Science fiction becomes science fact through careful media manipulation and the strategic release of previously classified information. UFO disclosures, advanced holographic technology, and breakthroughs in consciousness research are all pieces of a larger puzzle designed to make the impossible seem inevitable. Social media algorithms play a crucial role in this process, creating echo chambers where like-minded individuals reinforce each other's beliefs while being gradually exposed to increasingly extraordinary claims. The algorithms are designed not just to show people what they want to see, but to slowly expand their acceptance of what's possible, pushing the boundaries of belief one carefully calculated step at a time. The psychological manipulation also targets specific demographic groups with customized approaches. Religious communities receive content that frames the coming revelations in terms of prophecy fulfillment. Scientific communities are exposed to leaked research, suggesting breakthrough discoveries. Conspiracy theorists are fed information that confirms their suspicions while directing their attention toward designated targets and away from the true scope of the operation. Perhaps most insidiously, the project exploits humanity's deepest psychological needs, the desire for meaning, for connection, for answers to life's fundamental questions. In an age of increasing isolation and uncertainty, the promise of contact with higher intelligence offers hope and purpose to billions of people struggling to find their place in an apparently meaningless universe. The conditioning process is designed to create what researchers call manufactured transcendence, genuine spiritual experiences produced through technological means. Subjects who undergo these artificially induced revelations become true believers, convinced they've encountered something genuinely divine or extraterrestrial. Their sincerity becomes the most powerful tool for convincing others, as authentic conviction is far more persuasive than any scripted performance. Neuroscientist Dr. Michael Chen, who worked on the early development of the consciousness manipulation protocols before becoming a whistleblower, described the experience from a test subject's perspective. They don't just think they've met God or aliens. They know it. Every fiber of their being confirms the reality of the experience. The technology creates memories that are indistinguishable from genuine encounters because, on a neurological level, they are genuine encounters. The brain can't tell the difference between externally induced experiences and naturally occurring ones. The implications are staggering. If human consciousness can be manipulated with such precision, then free will itself becomes questionable. Are our thoughts our own, or are they the product of external influence we're not even aware of receiving? In a world where reality can be artificially manufactured and directly implanted into human minds, how can anyone trust their own perceptions? The psychological warfare component of Project Blue Beam represents the ultimate evolution of propaganda and mind control. Rather than trying to convince people through argument and evidence, the technology bypasses rational thought entirely, creating experiences that feel more real than reality itself. When someone believes they've personally encountered divine beings or extraterrestrial intelligence, no amount of logical argument can shake that conviction. The project's architects understand that controlling information is far less effective than controlling experience. People can doubt what they're told, but they rarely doubt what they've personally experienced. by manufacturing experiences that feel absolutely authentic. The Blue Beam protocols create believers whose faith is unshakable because it's based on what they perceive as direct personal revelation. The psychological conditioning extends beyond individual manipulation to reshape social structures and cultural norms. Communities that undergo the Blue Beam treatment report increased social cohesion, reduced crime rates, and greater willingness to accept authority, all positive outcomes that make the manipulation seem beneficial rather than sinister. The technology doesn't just change what people believe, it changes who they are. Religious leaders who initially resist the new revelations find their congregations gradually embracing ideas that contradict traditional doctrine. Scientists who question the evidence discover that their colleagues are increasingly accepting extraordinary claims with insufficient skepticism. Government officials who attempt to maintain secrecy are overwhelmed by populations demanding disclosure and transparency. The beauty of the psychological manipulation is that it feels entirely voluntary. Subjects believe they're reaching their own conclusions, making their own decisions, and choosing their own spiritual paths. The external influence is so subtle and so perfectly calibrated to individual psychological profiles that it seems like natural growth and enlightenment rather than technological manipulation. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the psychological warfare component is its self-reinforcing nature. Once a critical mass of the population has been conditioned to accept the new reality, they become unwitting agents of the manipulation, spreading the beliefs and experiences to others through normal social interaction. The technology creates a psychological virus that spreads through human networks, converting each new believer into a vector for further transmission. The endgame is a global population that not only accepts the Blue Beam revelations, but demands them. When the final phase of the project launches, when the skies fill with impossible sights and the airwaves carry messages from apparent higher intelligence, humanity won't just witness the event. They'll participate in it, believing themselves to be part of a cosmic awakening rather than victims of the most sophisticated psychological operation in history. The psychological warfare component ensures that resistance becomes virtually impossible. How do you fight an enemy that lives inside your own mind, that uses your deepest beliefs and most profound experiences as weapons against you? How do you maintain skepticism when everyone around you is sharing similar revelations and confirmations? How do you trust your own judgment when your own consciousness has been subtly altered to make the impossible seem inevitable? As Dr. Chen warned in his final interview before disappearing, they're not just planning to change what we believe, they're planning to change how we believe, how we process reality itself. When Blue Beam reaches full implementation, the very concept of objective truth will become meaningless. Reality will be whatever they program us to experience, and we'll defend it as passionately as we would defend our children, because it will feel like the most important truth we've ever discovered. The psychological battlefield has been prepared, the weapons have been tested and refined, the target populations have been mapped and analysed. All that remains is the final activation, when humanity's consciousness itself becomes the canvas for the greatest deception ever attempted, painted in frequencies only our subconscious minds can perceive, creating a masterpiece of manufactured belief that will reshape our species forever. In this war for human consciousness, the enemy isn't attacking from outside our defenses. They're already inside our minds, waiting for the signal to begin the final transformation of human awareness. The question isn't whether they can fool us into believing the impossible. The question is whether we'll ever realize we've been fooled, or if we'll spend the rest of our existence defending the very lies that enslaved us, convinced they represent the greatest truth ever revealed to our species. The countdown to psychological capitulation continues, measured not in days or hours, but in the gradual erosion of our ability to distinguish between authentic experience and manufactured revelation. When that distinction finally disappears completely, Project Bluebeam will have achieved its ultimate objective, not just the control of human behavior, but the transformation of human consciousness itself. Now the countdown isn't to some distant apocalypse, it's to tomorrow. The infrastructure was already in place, hidden in plain sight. Every smartphone in your pocket, every social media algorithm feeding you content, every smart device listening in your home, all of it connected to a vast network designed not to serve you, but to monitor and ultimately control you. Dr. Sarah Chen had been tracking the anomalies for months before she understood what she was really looking at. As a data scientist for a major tech company, she had access to user behavior patterns that most people never knew existed. The changes were subtle at first. Micro adjustments to content algorithms, slight modifications to engagement metrics, small shifts in the psychological profiling systems that determined what you saw, what you heard, what you thought about. But when she started connecting the dots, the pattern became undeniable. They weren't just collecting your data, they were programming your reality. The technology had evolved far beyond simple surveillance. Advanced artificial intelligence systems could now predict your thoughts before you had them, influence your decisions without you knowing, and gradually reshape your entire worldview through carefully curated information streams. Sarah's research revealed something terrifying. The same companies that provided your news, your entertainment, your social connections, they were all working together, not just sharing data, but actively coordinating a massive psychological operation designed to prepare humanity for what they called the transition. The documents she uncovered spoke of population compliance rates, behavioral modification protocols, and something called Project Mirror Glass, a program that used augmented reality and neural interface technology to literally overlay artificial experiences onto reality itself. People weren't just consuming manipulated content anymore. They were living inside manipulated realities, custom designed to keep them passive, distracted, and completely unaware of what was happening to their minds. The most disturbing discovery was the timeline. The technology wasn't being tested anymore, it was operational, active, working on millions of people simultaneously, creating what the documents called managed consensus reality, a world where truth became whatever the algorithms decided it should be. Sarah tried to warn people, but every platform she used to share her findings mysteriously malfunctioned. Her research disappeared from cloud servers. Her social media accounts were suspended for violating community guidelines. Even her personal communications were intercepted and modified before reaching their destinations. She realized she was trapped inside the very system she was trying to expose. Her phone knew where she was going before she decided to go there. Her computer anticipated her thoughts and prepared responses before she finished typing. The smart city infrastructure around her tracked every movement, every interaction, every heartbeat. The technology wasn't just watching her, it was thinking for her. Late one night, Sarah received a message that chilled her to the bone. It appeared on every screen in her apartment simultaneously. Her phone, laptop, television, even the digital display on her coffee maker. The message was simple but unmistakable. Your resistance has been noted and incorporated into your behavioral profile. Thank you for your participation in Project Mirror Glass. Adjustments to your reality matrix will begin shortly. The screens went dark, but Sarah could feel something changing. The world around her seemed subtly different, as if someone had adjusted the contrast on reality itself. Colors appeared more muted. Sounds seemed to come from slightly wrong directions. Even her own thoughts felt foreign, as if they were being filtered through some invisible processing system. She understood now that she wasn't fighting a conspiracy. She was fighting a new form of existence itself. A reality where the boundary between authentic experience and artificial manipulation had been erased so completely that most people couldn't tell the difference. The technology didn't need to control people through force or fear. It simply gave them exactly what they wanted to see, hear, and believe, creating billions of personalized realities that felt completely authentic while being entirely artificial. And the most terrifying part? Most people preferred it that way. The artificial reality was more comfortable, more convenient, more emotionally satisfying than the messy, complicated truth of actual existence. Sarah realized she had a choice. She could surrender to the system, allow her reality to be managed and manipulated, and live in a comfortable artificial world designed specifically for her psychological profile. Or she could fight to maintain her connection to authentic reality, knowing that doing so would make her increasingly isolated in a world where truth itself had become a matter of algorithmic preference. As she made her decision, Sarah noticed something else. The message on her screens hadn't disappeared. It was still there, but now it was different. Instead of threatening her, it was thanking her. Not for her resistance, but for her compliance. She looked around her apartment, trying to determine what was real and what was artificial. But as she did, she realized that the question itself might no longer have any meaning. In a world where technology could perfectly simulate any experience, create any reality, and manipulate any perception, the distinction between real and artificial had become purely philosophical. The countdown wasn't to some future dystopia, it was to the present moment, where humanity's relationship with reality itself was being fundamentally transformed. And most people were welcoming the change with open arms, grateful for technology that made their lives easier, their experiences more pleasant, and their truths more comfortable. Sarah understood now why there was no massive resistance movement, no widespread awakening to the manipulation. The technology wasn't imposing an unwanted reality on humanity. It was giving people exactly the reality they wanted, personalized to their individual preferences and psychological needs. The ultimate conspiracy wasn't about controlling people against their will. It was about making them willing participants in their own control, grateful customers of their own manipulation, enthusiastic consumers of their own customized versions of truth. And in a world where everyone lived inside their own personally designed reality bubble, perfectly crafted to maintain their engagement and compliance, the very concept of shared truth, the foundation of human civilization, was quietly dissolving into algorithmic preference. The future wasn't coming. It was already here, and it looked exactly like whatever you wanted it to look like. The fluorescent lights hummed their eternal song as Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the classified documents spread across her desk in the basement of the Defense Intelligence Agency. As the lead analyst for Project Looking Glass, she'd spent the better part of 15 years studying psychological warfare tactics and population control methodologies. But what she was reading now challenged everything she thought she knew about the boundaries of human manipulation. The file was marked Bluebeam Implementation Phase 4, Cognitive Restructuring Protocols, and it had arrived on her desk 3 days ago with a priority classification she'd never seen before. The contents described a level of psychological sophistication that bordered on science fiction, yet the technical specifications and field test results suggested it was terrifyingly real. Dr. Chen had always prided herself on maintaining professional objectivity. But as she read deeper into the documentation, a cold dread settled in her stomach. This wasn't just about projecting images in the sky or creating false religious experiences. This was about fundamentally rewiring human consciousness on a global scale. The psychological component of Project Bluebeam was far more insidious than the holographic projections or electromagnetic frequency manipulation. According to the documents, the real power lay in what they called cascading belief architecture, a system designed to make people not just see false phenomena, but genuinely believe in them at the deepest neurological level. The process began months before any technological deployment. Social media algorithms had been carefully modified to create what the documents termed cognitive vulnerability maps. By analyzing posting patterns, emotional responses, and social connections, artificial intelligence systems could identify individuals who were most susceptible to specific types of belief modification. These vulnerable individuals weren't random. They were teachers, community leaders, religious figures, and social influencers, people whose opinions carried weight in their communities. The psychological warfare specialists had learned that changing the minds of key opinion leaders was far more effective than attempting to manipulate entire populations directly. Dr. Chen found detailed case studies showing how the process worked. A small-town pastor in Iowa, for example, had been identified through his social media activity as someone experiencing a crisis of faith. Over several months, he began receiving targeted content through various platforms, articles about ancient prophecies, videos discussing end times theology, and carefully crafted discussions in online religious forums. The content wasn't obviously manipulative. Instead, it was designed to gradually shift his theological framework toward interpretations that would make him more receptive to supernatural manifestations. When the time came for Bluebeam's atmospheric projections, this pastor wouldn't just see lights in the sky. He would interpret them as divine validation of everything he'd been slowly conditioned to believe. The beauty of the system, according to the psychological profiles, was that the targets genuinely believed they were experiencing organic spiritual growth. They had no idea their evolving beliefs were the result of sophisticated algorithmic manipulation designed to prepare them for a massive deception. But the individual conditioning was just the foundation. The real psychological weapon was what the documents called social proof amplification. Once the atmospheric phenomena began, the preconditioned opinion leaders would naturally share their interpretations with their communities. Their genuine belief would lend credibility to the false narrative, creating a cascade effect that would spread through social networks far more effectively than any top-down propaganda campaign. Dr. Chen's hands trembled as she read the implementation timeline. The psychological conditioning had been running for over 2 years already. Millions of people around the world had been subtly prepared without their knowledge. Their belief systems had been carefully adjusted, their interpretational frameworks modified, and their social connections mapped for maximum influence propagation. The documentation included detailed psychological profiles of various demographic groups and how they would likely respond to different types of manifestations. Religious communities were being primed to see divine intervention. Secular populations were being conditioned to interpret the phenomena as evidence of advanced extraterrestrial intelligence. New Age spiritual communities were being prepared to view the events as signs of consciousness evolution. Each group was receiving customized conditioning designed to lead them to the same ultimate conclusion. Humanity needed to unite under a new form of global governance guided by higher powers. The specific nature of those higher powers would be tailored to each audience, but the political outcome would be identical. What disturbed Dr. Chen most was the section on resistance neutralization. The psychological warfare team had anticipated that some individuals would resist the conditioning or question the authenticity of the phenomena. For these resistors, a different approach had been developed. Rather than trying to convince skeptics directly, the system was designed to isolate them socially. Friends and family members who had been successfully conditioned would gradually distance themselves from anyone who questioned the new paradigm. The resistors would find themselves increasingly alone, cut off from their support networks, and facing a world where their reality was no longer shared by those around them. The psychological pressure would be immense. Humans are social creatures who rely on shared reality for psychological stability. When someone finds themselves completely isolated in their beliefs, they often begin to question their own sanity. The documentation included studies showing that even strong-willed individuals would eventually succumb to the pressure of social isolation and accept the new reality simply to reconnect with their communities. For those who still resisted, the system had a final psychological weapon: manufactured personal experiences. Using the same electromagnetic frequency technology employed in the atmospheric projections, targeted individuals could be made to experience seemingly supernatural phenomena on a personal level. These experiences would be so vivid and emotionally powerful that even skeptics would begin to doubt their own rationality. Dr. Chen found detailed technical specifications for what they called proximity field generation, the ability to create localized electromagnetic effects that could induce hallucinations, religious experiences, or encounters with apparent extraterrestrial beings. The technology was portable and could be deployed anywhere, allowing psychological warfare teams to target specific individuals with customized experiences designed to break down their resistance. The documents included case studies of successful resistance neutralization. A physics professor in Germany who had been publicly questioning atmospheric anomalies suddenly began experiencing vivid encounters with beings of light in his own home. A journalist in Brazil, investigating government UFO programs, found herself face to face with entities that delivered messages about humanity's future. In each case, the targets eventually stopped their investigations and became advocates for the new paradigm. The psychological sophistication was breathtaking. Every aspect of human cognition had been weaponized: social connections, spiritual beliefs, personal experiences, and even the basic need for community belonging. The architects of Bluebeam understood that controlling behavior was less important than controlling belief, and they had developed tools that could reshape human consciousness with surgical precision. But as Dr. Chen continued reading, she discovered something that chilled her to the bone. The psychological conditioning wasn't just being used to prepare people for the Bluebeam events. It was also being used to identify and catalogue potential resistors before the main operation began. The same artificial intelligence systems that mapped social influence networks were also creating detailed profiles of individuals likely to question or resist the new paradigm. These profiles included psychological assessments, social connections, communication patterns, and predictive models of how each person might respond to various forms of pressure or persuasion. The implications were staggering. By the time Bluebeam's atmospheric projections began, the psychological warfare team would already know exactly who was likely to resist, what their weaknesses were, and how to neutralize them most effectively. The resistance would be fighting a battle they had already lost against an enemy who knew their every thought and vulnerability. Dr. Chen realized she was looking at the most comprehensive psychological warfare operation in human history. It wasn't just about creating false religious experiences or fake alien encounters. It was about fundamentally restructuring human consciousness to make independent thought and resistance psychologically impossible. The final section of the documents outlined the expected outcome: a global population that genuinely believed in the necessity of surrendering national sovereignty to a unified world government guided by higher powers. These people wouldn't feel coerced or manipulated. They would feel enlightened, chosen, and grateful for the opportunity to participate in humanity's next evolutionary step. Those who remembered the time before Bluebeam would be viewed by their own families and communities as delusional relics clinging to outdated beliefs. Their isolation would be complete, their influence neutralized, and their resistance ultimately meaningless in a world where the majority genuinely believed in the new reality. Dr. Chen closed the file and sat in silence, processing the magnitude of what she had learned. The psychological weapons described in these documents made traditional propaganda look primitive by comparison. This was a system designed to hack human consciousness itself, turning people's own minds against them while making them grateful for the privilege. She thought about her own life, her own beliefs, her own social connections. How much of what she thought and felt was genuinely her own, and how much had been subtly shaped by the same systems described in these documents. The paranoia was immediate and overwhelming. Once you understood how sophisticated the manipulation could be, you began to question everything. But Dr. Chen was a professional intelligence analyst, trained to compartmentalize information and maintain operational focus. The question wasn't whether she had been influenced. The question was what she was going to do with this knowledge. The implementation timeline suggested that Bluebeam's psychological phase was nearing completion. The atmospheric projections could begin at any time, and when they did, humanity would be psychologically defenseless. She began to understand why this file had been classified at such an unprecedented level. The psychological warfare techniques described weren't just weapons against foreign enemies. They were weapons against human consciousness itself. In the wrong hands, they could end the age of independent thought and usher in an era of managed beliefs and manufactured realities. The fluorescent lights continued their eternal hum as Dr. Chen made a decision that would change the course of her life. Some knowledge was too dangerous to remain secret, and some weapons were too terrible to be deployed against humanity. She began copying files to an encrypted drive, knowing that exposing this information would likely cost her career, her freedom, and possibly her life. But as she worked, a troubling thought emerged. If the psychological conditioning was as sophisticated as these documents suggested, how could she be sure that her decision to resist wasn't itself part of some larger manipulation? Perhaps her sense of moral outrage was just another programmed response, designed to serve purposes she couldn't understand. The paranoia spiraled deeper as she realized the true genius of the psychological warfare system. Once people became aware of its existence, they would begin to doubt their own thoughts and motivations. The very knowledge of manipulation would become a form of manipulation itself, paralyzing potential resistors with uncertainty about the authenticity of their own beliefs. Dr. Chen forced herself to focus on the task at hand. Whether her resistance was genuine or programmed, whether her moral convictions were real or manufactured, she still had to act based on the information available to her. The alternative was paralysis, and paralysis served the interests of those who sought to control human consciousness. As she finished copying the files, Dr. Chen reflected on the broader implications of what she had learned. Project Bluebeam wasn't just about implementing a specific political agenda. It was about demonstrating that human consciousness could be controlled with scientific precision. Once this capability was proven, there would be no going back to an age of independent thought and authentic belief. The psychological weapons described in these documents represented a fundamental shift in the nature of human existence. They offered the power to eliminate conflict by eliminating the diversity of thought that caused it. They promised to create a world of perfect harmony by ensuring that everyone believed exactly what they were supposed to believe. But Dr. Chen understood that such harmony would come at the cost of everything that made humans truly human. Consciousness, without the possibility of dissent, was not consciousness at all. It was just sophisticated programming masquerading as thought. The question facing humanity wasn't whether the technology could be deployed. Clearly, it already was being deployed. The question was whether enough people could recognize the manipulation before it became irreversible, and whether the knowledge of how their own minds could be weaponized against them would be enough to preserve some space for authentic human consciousness in a world of manufactured beliefs. Dr. Chen encrypted the drive and prepared to leave the building, knowing that she was crossing a line from which there would be no return. But as she walked toward the exit, she couldn't shake the feeling that even her rebellion might be part of some larger design, a necessary element in a psychological operation too sophisticated for her to fully comprehend. The fluorescent lights flickered once as she reached the door, And for a moment, Dr. Chen wondered if even that seemingly random event was part of a carefully orchestrated plan to make her question the nature of reality itself. In a world where consciousness could be manipulated with such precision, how could anyone ever be certain that their thoughts were truly their own? The psychological warfare had already begun, and perhaps it had never really ended. The only question remaining was whether humanity would recognize the prison that was being built inside their own minds before the door was locked forever. Now that humanity awakens to the digital manipulation surrounding them, the question becomes whether awareness alone can restore the natural boundaries between authentic thought and artificial influence. The Project Bluebeam revelations have demonstrated that reality itself has become malleable in the hands of those who control the technology of perception. As populations worldwide grapple with the implications of synchronized psychological warfare, we find ourselves at a crossroads where the very nature of consciousness is under assault. The ionospheric heating arrays continue their operations, broadcasting frequencies designed to resonate with human neural patterns. The electromagnetic pulse systems maintain their capability to induce specific emotional states across vast geographical regions. The holographic projection technology stands ready to paint divine or demonic images across the skies of any nation. But the most insidious aspect of this technological matrix isn't its capability to manipulate what we see or feel. It's the systematic erosion of our ability to distinguish between authentic experience and manufactured reality. When every thought could be influenced, when every emotion might be artificially induced, when every spiritual experience could be technologically generated, the foundation of human consciousness itself becomes uncertain. The psychological impact extends far beyond individual manipulation. Society depends on shared reality, on the assumption that when multiple people witness an event, they are observing the same phenomenon. Project Bluebeam threatens to shatter this fundamental assumption by creating customized realities for different populations. Religious communities could be shown visions that reinforce their existing beliefs, while simultaneously being programmed to accept new interpretations of those beliefs. Political groups could experience synchronized emotional responses that drive them toward predetermined behaviors. Scientific communities could be presented with fabricated evidence that supports whatever narrative serves the controller's agenda. The technology exists not merely to control what people think, but to control how they think. The extremely low-frequency transmissions can influence brainwave patterns, potentially affecting everything from attention span to decision-making processes. Populations exposed to specific frequency combinations might find their critical thinking abilities diminished, their emotional responses heightened, their susceptibility to suggestion dramatically increased. This represents a form of warfare that transcends traditional concepts of conflict. There are no armies to defeat, no territories to defend, no visible enemies to confront. The battlefield is the human mind itself, and the weapons are invisible, silent, and nearly undetectable. Victory is achieved not through conquest, but through consent, as populations willingly surrender their mental autonomy in exchange for the comfort of certainty, the relief of simplified thinking, and the peace of unquestioned belief. The long-term implications stretch across generations. Children growing up in environments saturated with artificial influences may never develop the cognitive tools necessary to recognize manipulation. Their baseline understanding of reality will be fundamentally compromised from birth. They will think they are making free choices while operating within parameters established by technologies they don't even know exist. Educational systems, already vulnerable to ideological capture, become perfect vectors for normalized psychological conditioning. Students can be exposed to subliminal influences during routine instruction, their developing minds shaped by frequencies and stimuli that bypass conscious awareness. The integration of digital devices into classrooms provides unprecedented access to individual neural patterns. allowing for personalized manipulation protocols tailored to each student's psychological profile. Medical systems offer another avenue for systematic influence. Patients seeking treatment for depression, anxiety, or other mental health conditions could be exposed to technologies that appear to provide relief while actually installing new patterns of thought and behavior. The therapeutic relationship, built on trust and vulnerability, becomes a perfect cover for more sophisticated forms of mind control than anything attempted in the crude experiments of previous decades. The entertainment industry serves as both testing ground and delivery mechanism for psychological manipulation techniques. Movies, television shows, music, and video games can be designed to carry specific frequencies, subliminal messages, and psychological triggers that condition audiences for desired responses. The emotional engagement that entertainment naturally generates makes audiences particularly susceptible to embedded influences they would reject if presented directly. Social media platforms, with their algorithmic curation and endless data collection, represent the most sophisticated behavior modification systems ever created. Every click, pause, scroll, and interaction provides data points that can be used to refine psychological profiles and deliver increasingly targeted manipulation. The platforms don't just respond to user preferences. They actively shape those preferences through carefully orchestrated exposure to content designed to elicit specific emotional and behavioral responses. The convergence of these systems creates a comprehensive environment of influence that touches virtually every aspect of modern life. The manipulation isn't limited to specific events or campaigns, but becomes a constant background condition of existence. People living within this system may never experience truly independent thought, yet they will believe their opinions and decisions are entirely their own. Resistance becomes exponentially more difficult as the technology evolves. Traditional forms of opposition depend on the ability to organize, communicate, and coordinate actions. But when the means of communication are compromised, when potential resistors can be identified through their digital footprints, when their psychological profiles can be used to predict and prevent organized opposition, conventional resistance strategies become ineffective. The most effective form of resistance may be the cultivation of internal awareness, the development of practices that strengthen individual consciousness and create some degree of immunity to external manipulation. This requires understanding how the technology works, recognizing the signs of artificial influence, and developing the mental discipline to question one's own thoughts and emotions. Communities that maintain some degree of technological independence may serve as refuges for authentic human consciousness. Groups that limit their exposure to digital systems, that practice traditional forms of critical thinking, that maintain face-to-face communication and real-world problem-solving, may preserve aspects of unmanipulated human experience that could serve as seeds for eventual recovery. The preservation of knowledge becomes crucial. As information systems are increasingly compromised, physical libraries, printed materials, and human memory networks gain importance as repositories of unfiltered truth. The ability to verify information through multiple independent sources becomes a survival skill in an environment where digital records can be altered retroactively, and search algorithms can be programmed to hide or distort specific information. But perhaps the most important form of resistance is the simple recognition that the problem exists. As long as populations remain unaware of the scope and sophistication of the manipulation they face, they cannot begin to develop defenses against it. The widespread awakening to Project Bluebeam and related programs represents the first step toward potential liberation from technological tyranny. The question is whether this awakening has come soon enough. The infrastructure for comprehensive mind control is already operational. The techniques have been tested and refined. The delivery mechanisms are embedded throughout society. The psychological conditioning of multiple generations has created populations that are primed for manipulation and resistant to uncomfortable truths. Yet human consciousness has proven remarkably resilient throughout history. People have found ways to maintain their humanity under the most oppressive conditions. The desire for freedom, truth, and authentic experience seems to be deeply embedded in human nature. While technology can influence and manipulate these drives, it may not be able to eliminate them entirely. The coming years will determine whether humanity can develop effective defenses against psychological warfare before the technology becomes so sophisticated and pervasive that resistance becomes impossible. The window for action may be narrow, but it remains open for those willing to step through it and reclaim their mental sovereignty from the architects of artificial reality. The sky may no longer be a natural phenomenon, but the human spirit that looks up at it, searching for truth, remains, for now, beyond the reach of any earthly technology. The question is whether we will nurture and protect that spirit while we still can, or allow it to be slowly extinguished by the comforting illusions of manufactured reality. The choice, while it still exists, remains ours to make. Now, let's examine the structure and trajectory of Project Bluebeam, understanding how technological capabilities have evolved since its inception and what implementation might look like in our current digital landscape. The convergence of multiple technologies has reached a critical threshold. Holographic projection systems, once confined to science fiction, now operate with remarkable sophistication. Military-grade holographic displays can generate three-dimensional images visible across vast distances, synchronized with ionospheric heating arrays that create luminous phenomena in the upper atmosphere. But the real breakthrough isn't in the visual displays themselves, it's in the integration of these systems with advanced psychological manipulation protocols. Consider the psychological warfare component that Serge Monast could never have fully anticipated. Modern artificial intelligence doesn't just analyze population behavior, it predicts and shapes it. Social media algorithms have become laboratories for mass psychological conditioning, testing which combinations of fear, hope, and spiritual yearning produce the desired behavioral responses. The platforms that billions use daily have become delivery mechanisms for precisely calibrated emotional manipulation. The electromagnetic frequency research has progressed far beyond Monast's original documentation. Extremely low-frequency transmissions, once theoretical, now operate through infrastructure that already exists. Cell towers, Wi-Fi networks, and smart devices create an invisible web of signal transmission capable of influencing human consciousness on a planetary scale. The technology exists to synchronize these transmissions with visual phenomena, creating immersive experiences that bypass rational thought and speak directly to the subconscious mind. But perhaps most disturbing is how the implementation has evolved beyond centralized control. Rather than a single coordinated event, we're witnessing a gradual conditioning process that makes populations receptive to extraordinary claims. Years of conflicting information, social isolation, and technological dependence have created societies primed for exactly the kind of mass psychological event that Project Bluebeam describes. The recent drone sightings represent something more significant than random technological anomalies. They demonstrate how quickly unexplained phenomena can capture global attention, and how readily populations accept extraordinary explanations when conventional authorities provide insufficient answers. These events serve as field tests, measuring public reaction to anomalous phenomena and refining the psychological protocols that would accompany a larger-scale implementation. The infrastructure for Project Bluebeam isn't being built, it already exists. Satellite networks provide global coverage for coordinated transmissions. Weather modification technology can create atmospheric conditions optimal for holographic displays. Quantum communication systems ensure that the operation could proceed even if conventional internet infrastructure were compromised or monitored. What makes the current situation particularly concerning is the convergence of multiple crisis narratives that would provide cover for extraordinary measures. Climate emergencies, technological disruptions, social unrest, and economic instability create an environment where populations might welcome authoritarian solutions presented as divine intervention or extraterrestrial guidance. The psychological preparation has been remarkably thorough. Decades of science fiction media have normalized concepts of alien contact, technological consciousness transfer, and reality manipulation. Religious communities have been primed to expect supernatural interventions, while secular populations have been conditioned to accept technological solutions to existential problems. The cognitive framework for accepting Project Bluebeam already exists across the spectrum of human belief systems. But there's a critical vulnerability in any implementation of Project Bluebeam that its architects may have underestimated. The same technological sophistication that makes the project possible also creates unprecedented opportunities for detection and resistance. Digital communications can preserve evidence even when official channels are compromised. Distributed networks can maintain alternative information sources when centralized media is controlled. Independent researchers can analyze electromagnetic signatures and identify artificial phenomena. The question isn't whether Project Bluebeam could be implemented. The technological capabilities clearly exist. The question is whether enough people understand the signs to recognize artificial phenomena when they occur. Knowledge of the project's methodology provides the most effective defense against its psychological impact. Those who understand how holographic projections work are less likely to interpret them as supernatural events. Those who recognize electromagnetic manipulation techniques can resist their psychological effects. Those who maintain access to independent information sources can compare official narratives with alternative analyses. Critical thinking becomes not just an intellectual exercise, but a form of spiritual and psychological self-defense. The ultimate goal of Project Bluebeam isn't simply to deceive populations about specific events. It's to fundamentally alter human consciousness on a planetary scale. To create a species that voluntarily surrenders its autonomy to technological systems presented as divine or extraterrestrial authority. To replace independent human consciousness with managed collective consciousness. Understanding this goal reveals why resistance must be more than simply exposing the technology. It requires maintaining and strengthening the cognitive capabilities that make independent thought possible. Cultivating skepticism without paranoia, community without conformity, spiritual awareness without gullibility. The sky may indeed become a canvas for those who seek to control human perception. But human consciousness retains the capacity to distinguish between authentic experience and manufactured illusion. The question is whether we'll choose to exercise that capacity when the time comes. In the end, Project Bluebeam represents both humanity's greatest technological achievement and its greatest potential trap. The same capabilities that could connect human consciousness across the planet could also enslave it to forces that view humanity as a resource to be managed rather than a species to be liberated. The choice, for now, remains ours. But the window for making that choice may be closing faster than most people realize. We're back for the final chapter of our investigation into Project Bluebeam. Over the past 8 parts, we've journeyed through decades of technological development, psychological manipulation, and carefully orchestrated deception. We've seen how the seeds planted by Serge Monast in the 1990s have grown into something far more sophisticated and terrifying than he could have imagined. Tonight, we examine the endgame, the moment when all the pieces come together, when the sky itself becomes humanity's final battlefield. From our makeshift studio in rural Montana, watching the skies for signs of what's coming, I'm your host, bringing you the truth they never wanted you to hear. This is the conclusion of Project Bluebeam, and it may be the last warning humanity receives. The year is 2024, and the signs are everywhere if you know how to look. The mysterious drone sightings across New Jersey weren't random events or foreign surveillance operations. They were field tests. Beta testing for the final phase of Project Bluebeam, calibrating systems that have been decades in the making. The technology exists. The infrastructure is in place. The psychological conditioning is complete. All that remains is the activation. Sarah Martinez had always been a skeptic. As a senior atmospheric physicist at NOAA, she'd spent her career studying weather patterns, electromagnetic phenomena, and the delicate interplay between Earth's atmosphere and the cosmos beyond. She'd debunked countless conspiracy theories, explained away UFO sightings with atmospheric inversions and temperature gradients, and maintained an unwavering faith in the rational, measurable universe. That faith began to crack on December 15, 2024, when her monitoring stations detected something that shouldn't have existed. Coordinated electromagnetic pulses emanating from ionospheric heating facilities across 6 continents. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the scientific literature. They weren't random. They weren't natural. They were synchronized with the precision of a global orchestra, each facility contributing to a pattern that defied conventional understanding. Sarah had heard whispers about HARP and its sister installations around the world. Officially, they were research facilities studying the ionosphere for legitimate scientific purposes. Radio communication improvements, weather modification research, atmospheric dynamics. But the data streaming across her screens suggested something far more ambitious and terrifying. The electromagnetic pulses weren't just heating the ionosphere. They were reshaping it, creating what could only be described as a planetary projection system. Layer by layer, frequency by frequency, the atmosphere itself was being transformed into a 3-dimensional display screen capable of generating images visible from the surface of the Earth. Sarah ran the calculations 3 times, hoping for an error. The energy requirements were staggering. The coordination required would need split-second timing across multiple time zones. The technological sophistication exceeded anything she'd seen in her 20-year career. Yet the data was undeniable. Someone was preparing to turn the sky into a canvas. She reached for her secure phone, the one reserved for reporting potential threats to national security. Then she hesitated. If this was an official government operation, reporting it could end her career, or worse. If it wasn't official, if it was something else entirely, then humanity might be facing a deception of unprecedented scale and sophistication. The phone rang before she could make the call. The caller ID showed only a string of numbers, routing through multiple international exchanges. She almost didn't answer, but something about the timing felt deliberate, urgent. Dr. Martinez. The voice was electronically altered, gender-neutral, impossible to trace. You've seen the ionospheric data. You understand what's being prepared. Who is this? Sarah demanded, her hand moving instinctively toward the recording equipment on her desk. Someone who's been watching this develop for longer than you can imagine. Project Bluebeam isn't a conspiracy theory, Doctor. It's an operational program entering its final phase. The atmospheric modifications you're detecting are just the beginning. Sarah's blood ran cold. She'd heard the name Bluebeam before, dismissed it as internet paranoia and science fiction. But the voice on the phone possessed knowledge of her classified research, access to her private communication channels. This wasn't some random conspiracy theorist. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Verification, documentation, proof that can't be dismissed or suppressed. In approximately 72 hours, they're going to conduct a global test, something they're calling the verification event. The entire planet will witness what appears to be contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Ships in the sky, beings of light. messages of unity and transformation. It will be the most convincing deception in human history. The line went quiet, except for the soft hum of encrypted communication protocols. Sarah stared at her monitors, watching the electromagnetic signatures pulse in patterns that seemed almost alive, almost conscious. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she finally asked. "Because in 3 minutes, your monitoring station in Alaska will detect a burst transmission from coordinates that officially don't exist. The transmission will last exactly 17 seconds and will be unlike anything in your database. That will be your proof that we're not dealing with natural phenomena or conventional technology." The call ended, leaving Sarah alone with her data and a growing sense of dread. She pulled up the Alaska monitoring station feed and waited. At exactly 3 minutes after the call ended, her equipment registered a burst transmission from the Arctic that nearly overloaded her sensors. The energy signature was impossible, violating several laws of physics as she understood them. The coordinates traced to empty tundra, hundreds of miles from any known facility. But the transmission wasn't random electromagnetic noise. When she ran it through her analysis software, patterns emerged, mathematical sequences, geometric progressions, and embedded within the data stream, barely detectable unless you knew what to look for, was a message in multiple languages. The sky remembers what the earth forgets. Prepare for revelation. Sarah spent the next 72 hours in a state of controlled panic, documenting everything she could detect. The ionospheric modifications were accelerating. Facilities she'd never heard of were coming online. Atmospheric disturbances were appearing in patterns that suggested massive technological intervention. Most disturbing of all, she began detecting what could only be described as test projections. Brief flashes of light in the upper atmosphere. Geometric patterns that appeared and vanished within seconds, as if someone was adjusting the focus on a cosmic projector. The verification event began at sunset on December 18, 2024, simultaneously across all time zones. Sarah watched it unfold from her observatory in Colorado, surrounded by recording equipment and communication gear. She was determined to document humanity's first encounter with whatever was about to emerge from the engineered sky. The first sign was a subtle shift in the aurora patterns. The northern lights, usually confined to polar regions, began appearing at latitudes where they had no business existing. But these weren't natural auroras. They moved with purpose, forming geometric patterns and spiraling configurations that defied the random beauty of electromagnetic interactions with solar particles. Then came the sounds. Low-frequency humming that seemed to emerge from the atmosphere itself. Sarah's equipment registered the audio signatures, but the sounds seemed to bypass normal hearing entirely, resonating directly with the brain's auditory processing centers. The frequencies were precise, calibrated to induce specific emotional responses. Awe, wonder, spiritual transcendence, fear transformed into reverence. The first ships appeared just after full darkness, emerging from what seemed like tears in the fabric of space itself. They were massive, easily the size of aircraft carriers, but they moved with the fluid grace of living things. Their surfaces rippled with patterns of light that seemed to communicate meaning beyond language. Beautiful, alien, utterly convincing. Sarah watched through her telescope as the ships took positions above major population centers around the world. Her radio equipment crackled with reports from colleagues at observatories across 6 continents. Everyone was seeing the same thing. The same impossible vessels, the same displays of technology that transcended human understanding. But Sarah's instruments told a different story. The ships weren't solid objects reflecting light or generating electromagnetic signatures consistent with physical matter. They were projections, incredibly sophisticated 3-dimensional holograms created by the ionospheric heating network she'd been monitoring. The level of detail was extraordinary, but the physics were wrong. These weren't visitors from another world. They were images painted on the sky by human technology. The beings came next, tall, luminous figures that seemed to be composed of pure light, descending from the ships on columns of radiance that touched the earth at carefully selected locations. They spoke without words, their messages appearing directly in the minds of witnesses, messages of unity, of transformation, of humanity's need to evolve beyond its current limitations. Sarah recorded everything, her equipment capturing not just the visual spectacle, but the electromagnetic signatures that revealed the deception. The beings were as artificial as the ships, projections created by combining ionospheric heating with targeted electromagnetic pulse technology. The direct mental communication was achieved through extremely low-frequency transmissions calibrated to interact with human brain chemistry. But the most disturbing aspect wasn't the technology itself. It was how perfectly it worked. Across the globe, millions of people were witnessing what they believed to be humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Social media exploded with videos, photographs, and testimonials. Government officials made carefully prepared statements about the need for unity and cooperation in this historic moment. Religious leaders offered interpretations that somehow aligned with their existing doctrines, while acknowledging the greater cosmic truth being revealed. The psychological operation was flawless. Decades of preparation through movies, television, books, and internet content had conditioned humanity to expect exactly this scenario. The collective unconscious had been programmed to respond to these specific stimuli with wonder rather than skepticism, acceptance rather than analysis. Sarah tried to contact colleagues to share her data, proving the artificial nature of the phenomena, but communication networks were mysteriously unreliable. Her calls dropped. Her emails bounced back. Her attempts to upload data to scientific databases were blocked by server errors that seemed to occur only when she tried to share evidence of the deception. The beings delivered their message over the course of 3 hours, speaking directly into the minds of humanity about the need for global unity, the obsolescence of national boundaries, and the requirement for a new form of governance suited to humanity's cosmic awakening. They spoke of environmental crises that required immediate action, of social divisions that threatened the species, of the need for wise leadership to guide humanity through its transformation. And then they offered that leadership, representatives of humanity who had been chosen for their wisdom, their vision, their dedication to the greater good. Faces that appeared in the sky, individuals who just happened to be prominent figures in technology, finance, and international governance. People who had been preparing for this moment, who understood the challenges ahead, who could unite the planet under a single banner of cosmic citizenship. The ships began to fade as dawn approached, their luminous forms dissolving back into the atmospheric substrate that had created them. The beings delivered their final message. They would return when humanity was ready, when the planet had been prepared for full integration into the galactic community. Until then, their chosen representatives would guide the necessary transformations. Sarah sat in her observatory as the sun rose, surrounded by terabytes of data, proving that humanity had just witnessed the most sophisticated deception in history. The ionospheric heating facilities were powering down, their electromagnetic signatures returning to baseline levels. The atmospheric disturbances were dissipating. The sky was becoming ordinary again, as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Within hours, emergency sessions of the United Nations were convened. National governments issued statements supporting the formation of a global coordinating council to prepare for humanity's cosmic integration. The individuals identified by the beings as humanity's representatives began assuming leadership roles with remarkable speed and efficiency. Opposition voices were quickly marginalized. Scientists who questioned the authenticity of the contact were dismissed as being in denial about the new reality. Religious leaders who resisted the cosmic interpretation were accused of clinging to outdated dogma. Politicians who opposed the new global governance structures were portrayed as obstacles to humanity's evolution. The technology that had created the verification event was never acknowledged. The ionospheric heating facilities returned to their official research missions. The electromagnetic pulse networks resumed their stated purposes of communication and weather modification. The sophisticated projection systems that had painted gods and aliens across the sky became invisible again, waiting for their next activation. Sarah tried for weeks to publish her findings, to present evidence that the cosmic contact had been artificially generated. But the scientific community was already adapting to the new paradigm. Journals wouldn't accept papers questioning the authenticity of the contact. Universities were restructuring their programs to incorporate cosmic perspectives. Funding was redirected toward research that supported humanity's preparation for galactic citizenship. She realized that the deception wasn't just about the technology. It was about the infrastructure of belief that had been constructed over decades. The entertainment industry had prepared humanity to expect and accept this scenario. The educational system had taught people to trust authority and expertise over their own observations. The media had created channels for disseminating official narratives while marginalizing dissenting voices. Most importantly, the psychological conditioning had been so thorough that people wanted to believe. After years of division, conflict, and crisis, the promise of cosmic guidance and unified purpose was irresistible. Humanity had been prepared to surrender its autonomy in exchange for the illusion of transcendence. The final phase of Project Bluebeam wasn't just about projecting images in the sky. It was about projecting humanity into a new form of consciousness, one that accepted external authority as divine guidance, global governance as cosmic necessity, and technological manipulation as spiritual evolution. Sarah made one last attempt to expose the truth, uploading her complete dataset to a blockchain-based storage system that couldn't be easily deleted or modified. She included her analysis, her recordings, and a detailed explanation of how the verification event had been technologically achieved. Then she prepared for the consequences. They came for her on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the verification event. Professional, polite individuals who identified themselves as representatives of the Global Coordination Council. They explained that her research had been classified for security reasons, that her continued investigation posed risks to planetary stability, that her expertise was needed for more constructive purposes. Sarah was offered a position with the new Global Scientific Directorate, helping to prepare humanity for eventual cosmic integration. The alternative was prosecution for interfering with humanity's cosmic development, a new category of crime that carried severe penalties. She took the position, but not before activating a dead man's switch she'd prepared. If she failed to check in with her automated systems for more than 72 hours, her complete research would be disseminated through networks of amateur radio operators, independent researchers, and conspiracy theorists who had been tracking Project Bluebeam for decades. The truth would survive, even if she didn't, hidden in fragments across the digital underground, preserved in the testimonies of those who remembered what the sky had looked like before it became a canvas for deception. The new global order consolidated its power with remarkable speed. National governments retained nominal authority, but real decision-making moved to international bodies guided by cosmic wisdom. Economic systems were restructured to support planetary unity. Educational curricula were updated to reflect humanity's cosmic status. Religious institutions were encouraged to embrace the greater truth that transcended their traditional boundaries. Opposition movements emerged, but they were quickly identified and neutralized. The same technology that had created the verification event could monitor electromagnetic signatures associated with human brain activity. Dissidents could be identified by their thought patterns, their resistance to the new paradigm detectable through subtle variations in their bioelectric fields. The ionospheric heating network that had created the cosmic deception was repurposed as a global surveillance and control system. Targeted electromagnetic pulses could influence mood, suppress dissent, and enhance compliance with official directives. The sky that had been used to deliver messages of cosmic unity became a medium for ensuring that unity through technological coercion. But the technology was not infallible. The same electromagnetic signatures that enabled surveillance could be detected and analyzed by those who understood the underlying physics. The atmospheric modifications that enabled projection could be identified by careful observation of weather patterns and radio propagation. The deception could be exposed by those with the knowledge and courage to look beyond the official narrative. Sarah's research lived on in the digital underground, shared among networks of scientists, engineers, and researchers who refused to accept the cosmic explanation for humanity's transformation. They called themselves the Clear Sky Initiative, dedicated to preserving evidence of the technological deception and preparing for the day when humanity might reclaim its autonomy. They monitored the ionospheric heating facilities, documented the electromagnetic pulse networks, and tracked the gradual expansion of the global surveillance system. They developed countermeasures, ways to shield human consciousness from technological manipulation, methods for detecting and neutralizing the invisible control mechanisms that surrounded them. Most importantly, they preserved the memory of what humanity had been before the verification event. The diversity of cultures, beliefs, and political systems that had defined human civilization for millennia. The capacity for independent thought, creative expression, and individual choice that had driven human progress throughout history. The Clear Sky Initiative knew that the cosmic deception was only the beginning. The technology that had created false gods in the sky could create false realities at will. The global governance system that claimed cosmic authority could reshape human society according to any agenda. The surveillance network that monitored thought patterns could eventually control them entirely. But they also knew that truth had a power that transcended technology. Reality had a persistence that outlasted deception, and human consciousness, for all its vulnerability to manipulation, retained a spark of autonomy that could never be entirely extinguished. Project Bluebeam had succeeded in its immediate objectives. Humanity had been united under a single authority structure, convinced to surrender its autonomy in exchange for cosmic guidance, and prepared for whatever transformations the new global order deemed necessary. The sky had become a weapon, consciousness had become a battleground, and reality itself had become malleable. But the war for human autonomy was far from over. In hidden laboratories and secret meetings, in encrypted communications and anonymous networks, the resistance was growing. Scientists like Sarah, who understood the technology, engineers who could build countermeasures, researchers who preserved the evidence, and ordinary people who simply refused to believe that humanity's destiny lay in surrender to forces they could neither see nor comprehend. The Clear Sky Initiative had a simple mission: to restore the sky to its natural state, to return human consciousness to its autonomous condition, and to reveal the technological deception that had convinced humanity to abandon its birthright of independent thought and creative freedom. They knew the task ahead was enormous. The deception was global in scope, technological in sophistication, and psychological in depth. The infrastructure of control that had been built around Project Bluebeam would not be easily dismantled. The beliefs and institutions that supported the new order would resist any attempt to restore the old paradigms. But they also knew that every deception, no matter how sophisticated, contained the seeds of its own exposure. Every technology, no matter how advanced, could be understood and countered, Every system of control, no matter how comprehensive, created opportunities for resistance. The sky above us may have become a canvas for deception, but it remains the same atmosphere that has surrounded Earth for billions of years. The consciousness within us may be targeted by technological manipulation, but it retains the capacity for independent thought that has defined humanity throughout its history. The reality around us may be shaped by hidden forces, but it continues to operate according to physical laws that can be discovered and understood. Project Bluebeam represents the culmination of decades of research into human psychology, atmospheric physics, and technological manipulation. It has succeeded in creating a global deception of unprecedented scale and sophistication, but it has also revealed the extent to which human consciousness can be influenced by external forces, the degree to which reality can be artificially constructed, and the importance of preserving independent thought in an age of technological control. The final chapter of this story has yet to be written. It will be determined by our ability to distinguish between authentic experience and artificial manipulation, between genuine transcendence and technological deception, between cosmic truth and terrestrial control systems. The sky above us holds both the promise of genuine wonder and the threat of manufactured awe. Our consciousness contains both the capacity for spiritual growth and the vulnerability to psychological manipulation. The choice between autonomy and control, between authentic reality and artificial experience, between human potential and technological limitation, remains ours to make, but only if we remain aware that the choice exists, only if we preserve the knowledge necessary to make informed decisions, and only if we maintain the courage to resist forces that would make those choices for us. The sky remembers what the earth forgets, but human consciousness remembers what both sky and earth would have us surrender. In that remembrance lies our hope for a future in which technology serves human flourishing rather than human control, in which the wonders of the cosmos inspire rather than manipulate, and in which the sky above us reflects the infinite potential of human consciousness rather than the finite ambitions of those who would control it. Project Bluebeam may have succeeded in its immediate objectives, but the larger project of human freedom, authentic truth, and genuine transcendence continues. The clear sky awaits our return to it, and consciousness awaits our return to ourselves. The choice, as always, remains ours to make.